At this point, I am well aware that my digital footprint will outlive me, and one of the things that will haunt me forever on this website is the fact that when I posted my initial drama recap of Don't Worry Darling, I fumbled the largest content goldmine bag in history by posting the video quite literally an hour before Harry Styles' Chris Pine Spitgate. This is a decision that I will have to live with for the rest of my days, but while I work on finding my own inner peace about that, I knew I had to see this crazy train through to the end once the movie actually came out. So on Thursday, September 22nd, I attended a late night showing of Don't Worry Darling. This video is going to be a review and critique of the film, as well as a recap of the actual theater experience, which was unlike any other. There is no way I can talk about this movie in the way it deserves to be discoursed about without heavy spoilers, so this is a warning for that. I will also be enlisting the help of my boyfriend Brian, who I roped into this experience because I needed moral support and also because he is an AMC Stubbs A-list member.
Okay, so we're here. We've made it to the Dolby Theater. To give you an impression of the vibe, they showed like a preview for Don't Worry Darling for like one of those like promo AMC things, and like people just saw Harry Styles and started giggling. So like that, if that's any indication of like where we're at and what we're in for.
To give further context, this was a 9 p.m. showing at an AMC and it was absolutely packed, probably because we live in a part of New York City that has a high population of people who would care about this nonsense, us included. My first impression of the film was that they definitely spoiled way too much in the trailer. The aesthetic is really quite something, but certain moments like the cracking of the eggs or the saran wrap scene really lose their impact because they were featured so heavily in a bunch of the promotional material. Don't get me wrong, the film looks great. It's very polished. I thought the production design and wardrobe were excellent, and a lot of shots were very inventive and unique. But this is all surface and no substance, and many of these sequences almost feel like filler, one, because the pacing of the whole film is a little off, and two, because we've literally seen all of it in the trailer. The first third of this movie is a slice-of-life collection of scenes in Victory, California, through the eyes of our main characters, Alice and Jack. Jack and the rest of the men in town go to work during the day, leaving their wives and their children to tend to the house while they're gone. Things start to go off the rails once the town begins to notice that one of the wives, Margaret, is a little broken. Bunny, played by Olivia Wilde, explains that Margaret and her son left town to go see what's beyond its borders, and she hasn't really been the same since. After witnessing a plane crash that's never really explained, Alice ventures out to the desert herself the way Margaret did. But Alice ends up back at home with no explanation after this experience, leaving herself and us to try to piece together what happened. At this point, a good chunk of this movie now has to rely on the dynamic between Alice and Jack, as she tries to figure out the mystery, and he has to gaslight her to keep the illusion going, and this is where we need to talk about Harry Styles.
Okay, so we just left the theater. How was that experience for you?
Insane. If you can see this movie in a full theater with everyone who's in on the meme of this movie, do it.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing, is that like I've never been in a theater experience where like it was like you know how like Marvel movies everyone's like cheering at all the jokes and stuff, but like this was just laughing. Mainly like every time Harry Styles was on screen.
Every time Harry Styles was on screen, people were just laughing.
Anytime he did anything, anytime he said anything. It wasn't funny, and he wasn't like trying to be funny.
I don't know if it's just because we were part of an audience that was in on the meme, but nobody was able to take Harry seriously. Listen, he's a very talented musician, he's handsome, he had the whole look down, but when he's acting next to Florence, who is clearly giving it her all, it's just sort of embarrassing, like, you just feel sort of embarrassed for him.
I read and heard stuff that like, listen, the movie's kind of bad, but Florence Pugh's amazing. She's amazing. Like, that is one of the best performances I've seen all year.
Yeah.
And she deserves so much better than this screenplay and the movie. Like,
I think that's why she might be like such a hater about it, because like she probably, at least in a test screening or something, probably like looked back at like how it came out and was like, oh wow, I'm acting my ass off. And I'm here next to this goober.
So eventually, Chris Pine's character, Frank, sort of catches on to Alice catching on that something is wrong, and further decides to play mind games with her by promoting Jack at this fancy dinner party, which leads us to one of the goofiest scenes in the whole film.
So for me, the funniest scene in this whole movie personally is it's a split between Florence Pugh like acting her ass off because she's like losing her mind, she's realizing that like something's wrong, and then it's intercut with Harry Styles doing like backflips on a stage and having like really like homoerotic energy with Chris Pine.
Yeah. I think you literally said in the theater, you were like, Harry Styles has better chemistry with Chris Pine than he does with Florence
does.
Pugh.
I also, that's the other thing about this whole movie is that like everyone, especially Nick Kroll's character, they all have this like, about Chris Pine, and I get it because he's supposed to be like this very charismatic leader, but all of the men are like, please sir, fuck my wife.
Yeah.
Like,
no, yeah.
To the point where it's like comedic and like
every male character in this that isn't Chris Pine is a cuck.
Now at this point the movie actually gets really intriguing, mainly because there's a tense battle of wits kind of scene that plays out between Frank and Alice at a dinner table, and like, Florence and Chris Pine are really good actors, so it really worked for me. You can see them challenging each other and the ideas of the whole world around them, but then unfortunately we don't get to dive much deeper than that. Eventually, they take Alice away to do this treatment on her because she's gotten too defiant and self-aware or whatever, but it doesn't really work because she starts to gain memory of her own real life instead. She was a doctor, and Jack was her unemployed partner who was fed up with how much she was working, which is how we learn that Jack signed Alice up for this tradwife simulator without her consent.
I feel like I should have seen it coming that, like, Harry Styles and Florence Pugh's characters were actually together outside of this world. But I thought it was a different guy. I thought, because they didn't show his face.
they made that motherfucker a Discord mod.
And then when you see him, oh my god.
It's just too goofy. It's too goofy for words. I think it could have worked with like another actor like Shia. Had they gone that route, I think it really could have worked.
Yeah.
Like I said, this is basically too goofy for words, especially because in the real world they give Harry's character an American accent, which he clearly is not that great at, and then they remedy this by allowing the character Jack to choose to be British in the simulation world, and I'll let Brian explain this part.
It's so weird. It's such a weird concept when you know that this dude is literally British. So he picks to be British in the world.
Yeah.
I feel like that's almost like a cop-out just for letting him not have to do an American... Can he do an American accent?
Well, he did it toward the end. Remember when he was like the real life like incel guy?
Yeah, but very limited.
But
it was almost like he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And midway through, they're like Shia LaBeouf was not going to do a British accent if he was in that movie.
No, there's no way.
Come on.
But this is another example of the movie sort of bending to Harry's limitations, because if this is supposed to be based on, like, 1950s Americana, why would you choose to be British in that world? Like, why would that even be an option? Now, I want to pause for a second to talk about the themes of this movie and why the execution is kind of messy. Clearly, this whole thing is a metaphor for the online radicalization of young white men. Chris Pine representing this sort of cult-like Andrew Tate figure preaching about traditionalism and whatever, which is actually a pretty interesting idea that could have worked. But besides the fact that Harry can't really carry the character, there are other ways it doesn't really work for me here. For one example, we find out that Bunny is aware of the fact that this is a simulation, but chose to participate in this world because in this world her kids are alive, implying that in the real world they aren't. So sure, that's an interesting concept, but it's sort of used as a throwaway line so that Bunny can tell Alice what to do and how to escape, but it also undercuts the whole theme of the movie by giving a female character a, sure, morally ambiguous, but genuinely good-hearted and righteous reason for wanting to do something like this. When I think the whole point is supposed to be that the trapping of these women in the simulation is the result of the cruel and selfish actions of their male counterparts. Also, listen, I know I got hate for this last time I talked about Olivia Wilde's whole rant about highlighting female pleasure in the film. For one thing, he eats her out once in the movie. It happens one time and he fingers her another time, so whatever, that's not really highlighting to me. And two, because of the reveal, we find out that Jack is a monster who's basically digitally kidnapped her without her consent. So the whole message about highlighting female pleasure really can't be taken all that seriously if he's secretly a controlling, scary Reddit incel. And there are plenty of other little things that don't really make sense either if you think about them for too long. Why did the plane crash in the first place? Why does Gemma Chan's character stab Chris Pine at the end when she seemed pretty complicit in the whole thing? What happens to their physical bodies in the real world while all of this is going on? And when Alice finally breaks free, we don't get any of those questions answered. It's a very ambiguous ending, just as things are about to get interesting.
Okay, so I just had this thought, because earlier when we were in the theater, I was like, okay, this would have been a lot better if it was the same concept, but it was directed by someone like Jordan Peele or Ari Aster, or somebody who can like do this sort of twisted concept like a lot better and a lot cleaner.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that this should have been a Black Mirror episode.
God damn it. Really?
Like,
yeah. No, it like actually should have been.
it should have just been like a very tight, like it could have even been like one of the specials that they do. They could have done like Bandersnatch Part 2. Like,
Man. With like the ability to like pick what happens.
Overall, I think the fanfare surrounding this movie will be more remembered than the movie itself. I think parts of it were really great. I really liked the concept, the visuals, but the pacing was off. Harry really couldn't carry the movie, and ultimately that's on Olivia Wilde for not directing him properly.
what are your final thoughts?
I keep saying, like, it's not a bad movie.
No.
It's not bad.
It is.
It was
Mid.
Thank
you for watching. Be sure to look out for my Halloween series. It's coming out this October.
Make sure to comment, rate, subscribe.
He will not be in it, but if you guys want more of Brian, like he won't be in the Halloween series, but if you guys want more of him, I'm sure that would do good things for his ego. So be sure to shout him out in the comments.
Yeah, I love being liked.
See, bye, Junio.
Goodbye. Bye-bye.